Hi, this is Nino Gonzalez, and something that I have been talking to you on past episodes of Making Sense actually happened to me, and I'll talk to you about that in the first opening minutes of my show. Well, what was it that happened to me that I've been talking about in my previous shows? Well, here I have one of my credit cards or a debit card, and basically what happened is the number got compromised. I don't know where, I don't know who, but I do know that one of the last places I used it was at a bar and grill, and I'm feeling that my number was compromised there because the next day, and I was at home, I received text messages from the credit card issuer that there were charges going from that were occurring in Minneapolis, that were occurring in Detroit, and no way I was in those locations at that time. So right away I called the card company and told them that I felt that my number was compromised, and they basically closed that account and reissued a new one. And the process went fairly smoothly. Basically, there were authorizations, and an authorization is not a complete charge until it is completed. They would have to let it complete, and then automatically they would open up a dispute. The nice thing about it is the dispute came back in my favor, so I wasn't charged that because I wasn't responsible for those charges. But it can happen anywhere, and I felt that now if I ever visit an eating establishment or maybe a bar and grill, I might be tempted to use cash more because we never know. That's one of the places where your credit card can be skimmed either by servers and they have a device where they skim your credit card and it takes down that magnetic code, and they can sell those numbers up on the black market, and then anybody can create a card with that magnetic strip. The thing that happened that made it a little bit easier on my card is that it wasn't chip enabled. So that's one of the things that credit card issuers are doing now is introducing the chip. And as you've noticed, when you go shopping, you insert the card and you have to let it wait there for a minute, and it takes a little bit longer for the transaction to process, but it's a safety feature instead of swiping. So the next card that they sent me did have a chip, and they were going to send me that anyways pretty soon because the card was about to expire. But something that I've been talking about on shows happened to me, and it wasn't a big amount because I caught it fairly soon, but it was a total of about $90. But still, since that card was tied to my checking account, basically those funds were withdrawn by my checking account, and then the credit card company had to put them back in, and the dispute process started. But just as a safety feature, since I didn't know where the information was gotten, you sort of feel violated. I still put a fraud alert on my 3 credit reports, and we're going to put up a slide that tells you the information of the 3 credit bureaus and the websites and the phone numbers in order to put a fraud alert. And basically what that does is that advises any type of people that are trying to obtain credit. It informs the creditors that to contact you to make sure that it is you, that you are the one that is applying for that credit. Now, all I had to do was call one of the one of the credit bureau companies, and then that one contacts the other 2. And remember, there's 3 credit bureaus: Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. So all I had to do was contact one, and they contacted the other one. Not only that, I was able to get a free credit report when that happened, and I was able to review it. But I don't really think anything happened, just that my card was compromised. But you start thinking about this and you feel a little bit violated, and better to be safe than sorry. So just be aware of those type of things that can happen. And I've known a lot of people that sometimes when they go out on trips and they know they're going to go to bars and restaurants, they buy prepaid loaded cards, so that way that doesn't happen to them, and you have a little bit more control on that. So it might sound a little bit paranoid, but next time I'll be paying cash. So Now, let's talk about psychology and money. On a previous show, we talked about if you're in different moods, it could affect your spending. And we talked about the difference between men and women and what affects them to drive their spending or to control their spending. And it all depends on what mood you're in. But I ran across a book, and it's a really good book, and it's called Loaded: Money Psychology and How to Get Ahead Without Leaving Your Values Behind. It's not a difficult book to read. It's a short book from start to finish, about a little bit over 200 pages. So you can finish that pretty quickly, a quick reading, but it has a lot of valuable information. So let me talk a little bit about Dr. Newcomb. She holds a PhD in behavioral economics, a master's degree in financial economics, and a master's certification in personal financial planning. And her, along with Stacy Black, a financial educator at BECU, one of Washington State's largest credit unions, are talking about how money and psychology affects your spending behavior. And it is true, because whether you're low income or high, people think they have the power over their finances, are happier than those that don't. It doesn't matter how much money you have, whether you make over $200,000 a year or $10,000 a year, you can be just as happy or just as miserable. It all depends on the attitude that you have and whether you have control over your money and not whether the money has control over you. And a quote that Dr. Newcomb said is, "People who feel powerful are happier, and people who feel powerful do save more." And I definitely do agree with that. So let's talk a little bit about some of the steps that she goes through in trying to change your attitude about money. The first step that she said is change your thinking. Change your thinking. And one of the things that we need is that we might feel tied down to a budget, and we might feel that we might be on a diet, or we might need a nap on our phone or a nap on our computer to help keep track of our expenses, but we really don't. And we have to start thinking differently, and we behave differently, and then we start having power over our money. So let's go through how we can change that thinking. First of all, she suggests that we list what you can and cannot control. So let's talk about those things that we can control. So for example, do we do things right away? Like, for example, we're in tax season right now. Do we file our tax return right away, or do we wait until the last minute, or do we not do it? And why is it that we put off doing things? And this also affects our money behavior. Even if we're not the primary earner, you may have much control over money situations than you think. For example, do you do the grocery shopping? Do you participate in important purchases, giving opinions? Do you choose schooling for kids or activities that they have to do? Do you support whoever is a primary earner? Do you support him emotionally, him or her? So it's real important to understand, to see what we can control and what we cannot. Because if we don't know what we can control, then we feel helpless by a financial struggle and don't focus on the mechanics of trying to take control over our money. Also, now let's talk about some things that we can't control. Sometimes we want to control situations in our life and we just can't do it. And one of the things that really holds people back, and I don't have a degree in psychology or anything, but one of the things that holds people back is the past. And usually a lot of people live with the past hanging on them. And one of the things is that we can't change our past. We can only look towards trying to see what we can do in the future and not to repeat what we did in the past. But a lot of us are burdened by what happened in the past. And one of the things that I talked about in a previous show is that sometimes that factors in embarrassment, the emotion of embarrassment. But let's talk about what things we cannot control. Our dependence. If we care for our children and our parents, we cannot control the fact that this will put a drain on our resources. And we should account for those things that we know that are going to happen, but we can't control it. If we are trying to look for another job and that dictates you to maybe move to another city, we might not be able to control that, and you might have to move, or you might have to maybe stay in the current location that you're in and try to make the best out of the job that you have. Time, and that's always a big factor. We can't control time. There's only 24 hours in a day, and there's only so much we can do within those 24 hours. And then other people, we can't control other people. Many of us might have a significant other, a spouse, and we can't control their behavior. Sometimes we can't control their spending ability, and we got to be able to adjust those things when we think about money. So some of the things that we have to do is, what do we have control over, and what is it that we don't? And once we make that list, then we're better prepared to start thinking differently about our spending habits and about the money that we have. Another thing is, put time on your side. Many of us don't plan. And how is your planning horizon? Is it a week? Is it a month? Is it 5 years from now? That's your time horizon. A lot of successful people, what they do, and I tell this to my students, is that if you have a goal, write it down. Or if you have several goals, write it down. If you're trying to lose weight, get out of debt, eat healthier, stop drinking as much, or whatever. Let's put that down on paper and put it up somewhere where we can see it, because once we can see it when we get up, we're reminded of what goals we need to achieve and try to stick to the plan. So that's one of the things that she suggests, is that make sure you write down what is it that you want to have towards your financial future. On average, people earning $50,000 a year and looking far ahead, like to retirement, save more actual dollars, not just as a percent of income, but than those making $100,000 who didn't look that far ahead. So it does depend on how much you make. But again, if you make over $100,000, you might not be saving enough for retirement as somebody who is making $50,000. Now, I've known individuals who make, let's say, about $20,000, $23,000 a year, and they have probably over $200,000, $300,000 saved up. A lot of these individuals do it because they have a plan and they have a goal in mind. So it doesn't matter how much you make, it's just setting that plan in motion. We'll talk more about these strategies about psychology and money on the next part of Making Sense. And please stay tuned. Welcome to the second half of Making Sense. And in the first segment, I was discussing about psychology and money, and we left off by discussing one of the strategies of putting time on your side. Now, in the previous segment, I had discussed that I have known individuals who maybe make about $20,000, $25,000 a year, but in the later years, they might have over $200,000, $300,000 saved up. Now, we also got to look at the age of individuals. A lot of these individuals possibly are older individuals that maybe grew up during tough times, maybe experienced some of the Great Depression and some of those tough economic times. So they tend to save a little bit more because they don't want to be stuck if there is a financial downturn in the economy. And they also focus on what they need and not what they want. There is a difference between needs and wants. But one of the other things that she suggests is actually writing down in a journal or an essay. And journalizing is really good to help us explore our feelings. But what is it that we want to do 20 years from now or when we retire? In her book, she makes a really good quote. It doesn't cost more to think ahead. We're just planning. Where do we want to live? Do we want to live in a city? We want to live in the countryside, in a suburb? Do we want to travel? And who are we going to spend it with? So it's important to write down our plans and making sure that we post those plans somewhere where we can be reminded about. So once you have, if you can't look that far ahead, then let's plan maybe 2 months ahead, 3 months ahead, half a year, 1 year. And then after you do that, then let's plan another year until we extend our horizon. So we got to put time on our side and making sure that we make adjustments to those plans as life changes occur. So it's important to visualize what we have, because otherwise we might not be prepared towards the later years. And what usually happens is that we usually have a higher debt to income ratio, lower savings rate, and impulse spending. So it's important to plan and what goals we need to reach. So, talking about goals, so let's talk about a survey by the U.S. Federal Reserve in 2015, and about 46% of Americans wouldn't have enough money put away to handle an emergency expense costing $400. That's almost half of all the American population. So in previous shows, I've talked about trying to set up an emergency fund. And I said, even if you put away $500, then let's extend it to $1,000, then let's build it up. But we need to have some sort of emergency fund set up, because if we don't, what happens? That creates stress. And money is the number one cause of stress in people's life. And it's usually the number one cause of relationship breakups. So financial dealings have a lot to do with our lives. So when these emergencies happen, they don't become emergencies. We can handle them if we have money set aside, and not everything becomes a mountain. Instead, they become little anthills that we can go over. Not only that, you'll also find that you'll be sleeping better and you'll have better peace of mind. And a third of the Americans say they have no money saved for retirement. According to GoBankingRates.com, nearly 1 in 4 has less than $10,000 saved up for retirement. So that's something that we got to think about, and we got to take a look and see, how much do I need for retirement? What is going to be my lifestyle? One of the big things that happens when you're thinking about retirement that you might not factor in is health issues. So as we talk about vehicles for retirement, we got to educate ourselves about the different types of retirement funds. And that will be a topic of another show that I will do. But let's just briefly go over some of those. Well, we have IRAs, which are known as individual retirement accounts, and we have Roth IRAs. Well, what's the difference between those two? Well, the IRA is basically your tax deferred. So any money that you put in right now will not be taxed, but will be taxed when you retire and you start pulling money out. With a Roth IRA, there's no tax benefits now, but there will be tax benefits in the future. So I'm going to put it in and I'm paying taxes on it now. There's no tax deferment, but when I take it out, I will not have to pay any taxes. So that's the difference. And of course, there's income limitations for both. And many of our employers now provide 401k plans. And it is important that we educate ourselves on how those 401k plans work, because you're the one that's responsible on making that money work for you and investing it in the different funds that they offer. So these retirement plans could be offered by Fidelity, Vanguard, Principal, just to name a few, but it all depends who your employer has selected as their retirement plan provider. So it's real important for us to be educated on the different funds, and that's another show I will be doing during this season, is talking about mutual funds and index funds that are associated within those, the most common type of funds that are associated with retirement plans, so you can take a look at them and maybe invest your money wisely. So budgeting doesn't have to feel like a diet where we're unhappy about keeping track of every nickel and dime and dollar that we spend. So instead, try putting a strategy for meeting personal underlying needs. For example, we might need food because we need to eat, or we need to feed our family, or we might need a house to provide shelter. And also, maybe it's a place for socializing, or maybe to fulfill a need for fun or for beauty. So it's important to help us have some fulfilling needs in order to have better grips on our money. So it helps to realize that every dollar you spend does not disappear, but instead fulfills your needs or the needs of your loved ones. So a lot of time what happens is that we might have $100, and all of a sudden that $100 is gone. Where did it go? Did it go to fulfilling our needs, or did it go to just wasting it? And that's one of the things that she takes a look at. So once you see that money doesn't flow away from you but works to serve you, it should be easier to see how you can lower expenses while meeting needs. And that's one of the things that I talked about. Let's know the difference between needs and wants. Do we need that new phone that is coming out? Do we need to spend money on 1,000 channels on our cable or satellite provider when we could be saving that money? Do we need that $35,000 truck or car? So we got to be realistic about our goals, because think about this. There might be somebody that you might know that might be driving an expensive car, or maybe dressed in designer clothes or carrying designer handbags, but that's just the outside. Maybe what do you think they feel on the inside? They might be embarrassed because of the credit card debt that they have, and they might not be able to sleep at night thinking of all the bills that they owe. So outward appearances are not an indication of really of how we're feeling inside. So let's talk about business lunches, or we go out to eat with our friends at work. So why don't we plan on maybe having a potluck, and we can still socialize, and people can bring in a variety of dishes, and you can still socialize among coworkers, and it might not cost a lot. That doesn't mean you don't have to go out, but not go out as often. So another thing that she mentions is celebrating your victories, whether they're large or whether they're small, because once we accomplish the goals that we have set out, then it makes us feel better. And I've talked about this in previous shows about getting out of debt. How do we approach getting out of debt? Do we tackle the smallest bill first, or the largest bill? Or do we tackle the one with the highest interest rate or the lower interest rate? Well, it all depends. In my opinion, I would tackle the one with the highest interest rate, whether it's large or small, because that money is being eaten up away by those high interest charges. But for your own good, it might be better off to pay off maybe a $500 bill and realize it as a victorious goal, and then that'll help you maybe get motivated to start paying off larger debt. So it all depends on what you think is going to make you feel good and help you achieve those goals. So if you're paying off that $500 debt, don't think about it, oh, well, there goes 500. Well, it's 500 that you spent in the past, but you're still responsible for. Think about it as an achievement, and think about the interest that you're going to save, and you're not going to have that monthly payment anymore. So money feels like it's gone, and then that feels disempowering. That's a quote from her book, and it's true. Once we see that money gone, sometimes we might feel down, but let's not feel down. Let's see what we have accomplished by letting that money go. Did it pay off a debt? Did it get me a new appliance that we really needed? What is it that it was used for? So don't tell yourself you're cursed when every time you think you're getting ahead, something happens and takes all your extra money. The car breaking down, your children getting sick, your pet getting ill. So let's maybe feel blessed that, hey, other people might have it worse than we do, and at least we have shelter overhead and we can feed our children, because there's a lot of people that don't. So realize the small victories and what is it that we have, and put meaning into that. Well, as I had mentioned before, one of the biggest causes of stress is money. And stress can really eat up away at you. It's going to cause how well you sleep. Um, it's going to cause how healthy you are. And it's also going to cause the relationships that you have. So it might be important to take control of our money and not let it create the stress that we usually think is associated with that. And a lot of times we put ourselves in those situations and we stress ourselves out. Financial advisors see clients who actually have so much money, they'll never outlive it, but have so much anxiety and feel so stressed out about money that they can't even buy their grandchild a birthday present. And that's the mentality that a lot of individuals have. And I see this with older individuals, especially those that have saved up a lot of money, but they're very protective of their money, and they're very protective of the way they spend it. And we take a look at how much they have, and they'll outlive the amount that they have because of the time that we think they might have. But it's better to be prepared than not, but it's how we think about money and how we approach it. Well, that wraps up this segment of Making Sense. And remember to catch all the shows of not just my series, but all the wonderful shows that are put on by El Paso Community College on our YouTube channel. And we'll see you next time on another episode of Making Sense.